Okay, so we're finally there. Let's load in our EXR file. So R to read, and we'll load that EXR in. Just like that. So that's looking really cool. It's nice and clean. We're going to drop down a Z defocus filter, and I'm going to make sure I drop it down here. And I'm going to turn off this use GPU if available, because this tends to crash. I think the Foundry are actually working on this right now on a fix. So I'm going to drag my focal point to the tree. Let's plug the image into the image. Let's view it, wait for that to load. I'm going to change the math to depth. We're going to change the output to focal plane setup. And I'm just going to slide this focal plane up like this. To get smaller increments when I'm moving, I can hold down Alt and left click here. And wherever is green is in focus. We can do the same for the depth of field as well. So we're increasing the depth of field, so the amount of depth that is in focus. I think something around that is fine. We can set the maximum blur amount. You can set that to something like 100. Doesn't really matter. What matters is the size here. So if we switch back to the result, wait for that to load a moment, you can see now the foreground is out of focus and the tree is in focus. But we have some artifacting here, which looks a little bit weird. So what we can do is we can drop down a filter, a road filter, drop it in here. And you notice that doesn't do anything because we need to filter erode the depth channel. Like that. And I'm going to change the filter erode setting to something like 33. Just going to watch as I go up with this. Just until we start to reduce those really weird artifacts. So that's looking better. But we've got way too much DOF. So if you increase DOF too much, you're going to reduce the overall scale of the scene. And you'll make the scene look miniature. So I'm going to turn my DOF down to something like the size down to something like 2. Let's see what that looks like. I'm just going to toggle this on and off using D. So I think that's looking kind of cool. Maybe we could even go a little bit less. I think something like that is kind of nice. Maybe even a touch more. Maybe 1.5. There you go. That's looking pretty cool. So what I did after this point is that I added a reduce noise V4 down. So this is by Neat Video, and I'd highly recommend getting this. And what this allows you to do is it denoises your EXRs. So if you set off a render, you can render an image with slightly lower samples, which results in a faster render, and then you can add the reduce noise in comp. So let's plug that in. And this would work if you're using multiple frames. We're only using a single frame, so there's no need for it. But that would be my usual method to reduce noise here. Let's do some grading. We're going to drop down a film convert node. And this is a plugin for Nuke that you can purchase. The first thing I usually do in here is I change the size to a Super 35mm camera. Or Super 35mm camera, yeah. And I have a little mess around with the settings. In this case, I chose the KD5207V3. I dropped the film color down just a touch, I think. So it's a little bit more subtle, something around 27. The grain, I dropped down to around 30. Like that. So if we switch before and after, we're just adding a little bit of grain in there. I had to play around with the shadows. Set the amount to around sort of 54. So we're just introducing a little bit of sort of purpley blue in the shadows there, which looks kind of cool. The midtones, increase this to around 23. And you can just have a play around with the slider here to change the color. I set this to 126. Something around there. The highlights, set this to 64.2 and just drop that slider right down to around 124. And you can see the kind of color that you're starting to introduce if you push this all the way up. I think all the other settings are left as is. Let's just have a little mess around with the temperature. Let's drop that down to around 5,250. And that is more or less the entire shot done. Not really any compositing. We've added some Z depth in, which is super simple. And we've just added a really quick grade in using the Film Convert plugin. What I'll do is I'll drop down a write node and we'll write out a JPEG. So we'll go up to this folder. We'll add a folder called Composited. And we'll drop this image in, so atmospheric environment underscore something like V001. And remember to add the extension, so .jpeg. Quality all the way up to 1. Subsampling to 444, so it's lossless, so we're not losing any detail. And we need to set the color space to output sRGB, which happens right at the end. And then we just hit render. Let's go into the composites images, check that out. And there you go, we have our final composited image.